A year after the first installment, Legacy of Goku would continue with a similar proposal, but exponentially improving all the elements that had great potential. Continuing with the story after the Frieza saga, the Legacy of Goku 2 would arrive. This is one of the most requested Dragon Ball games for Game Boy Advance, and it's clear that you have good taste, guys. Let's see how did it go with this title. Spoiler alert, it's definitely better than his prequel. With a background rich in history and characters, the Legacy of Goku 2 wanted to continue the story that was left unfinished in the first game after the Frieza saga, with characters like Gohan, Trunks and Vegeta who would join and have more prominence in the missions. Since this is a saga of games that the developers of Webfoot were creating, don't find it strange that they continue with the same formula that they were handling, which is probable that it was not to the pleasure of many, but believe me that just like me, my doubts disappeared after playing the first 15 minutes. While the first game had a very nihilistic tendency, one that tries to move away from that formula a bit and focus more in its RPG aspects so that the audience less rooted in the genre could enjoy it at the same level, this means that although the feeling of the game remains similar and the definitive game overs continue to exist, sending you back to the start screen every time you die, this experience feels more fleeting than the previous one, and I mean that in the best possible way. The prologue is great and manages to put all the fans of the franchise in context with what is happening in this mythical story of the future, but that is cut when they put us in control of little Gohan, taking advantage of his daily situation after the Frieza saga to show us a lot of the controls and elements with which we can interact in the new adventure, which are still very similar to those of the first game, of course. It feels like in less than a year the developers put effort into this. The navigation menu is much more fluid, more intuitive, the setting and perspective when moving through the environment is more organic, it feels very smooth and pleasant, it begins to move away a little from the technical limitations and begins to play with the beauty of the 32 bits. The movement was greatly benefited as well as the ideas in the development of the levels. They link events of the series very well with activities in the game, the dialogues are according, and although they continue to introduce generic adversaries and scenarios that the characters never originally had to go through in the story, I feel that it works excellently for what this second part is looking for, because since they are no longer a headache that can kill you at any moment, the journey is more enjoyable, or at least that's how I felt it. By giving the player more opportunities to advance without a mortality factor, you give them more confidence to handlebar in this world without fear of making any movement. It feels, in other words, more casual. Now, making excellent use of the technical level of the platform, the movement through different areas is manual, and they show us an example of free movement through the world of Dragon Ball. Just watch this, it's incredible to see such a representation of displacement on a Game Boy Advance. And not only that, the settings have expanded in incredible ways. It requires a lot of time in the game to fully travel areas like West City, and everything is full of NPCs and access to other places, music stores, libraries, newspaper shelves and much more. It little by little feels like a genuine RPG. That wasn't the only advancement, now you can play with different characters. In case the fact that we played with Gohan didn't make you realize it, we can use other fighters like Piccolo, Trunks and Vegeta for example, giving diversity to the game style, and it's not that they all have very distinctive special techniques from one another, but at least playing with another fighter always felt like a fresh advance. We can't spend all day moving the same character and feel that all the other Z warriors are just doing nothing, it would be a waste. If you're tired of games being too expensive, at Instant Gaming you can buy all the games you want at an incredible price. You even have the option to get pre-orders and gift cards with a big discount. I've been using it for several years now, and here are my latest purchases to show you guys that is completely legit, cheap, fast and safe. You can check it out in the link I leave you in the description down below. That would be a huge support for the channel. Let's get back to the video. The soundtrack was never really remarkable, not even in the first game. It doesn't generate anything distinguishable in me, like listening to it and say, wow, can you hear that? Legacy of Goku 2, that was a great game. No, that's not happening. But now, since the experience had taken a more casual turn, there were confrontations that could be considered boss fights outside of the saga's own enemies. For example, the dinosaur that we face with Piccolo when they are training for the arrival of the androids. Boss fights that are not the most innovative in the world, but they were adding elements of this game to a basket that in totally generates a great experience, one that very few titles were able to deliver. In the vast majority of occasions, games were limited to showing turn-based gameplay schemes, without depth in the interaction with characters, without generating a curiosity factor, like wanting to explore certain areas, and this game achieves that with full extent. Later on, many developers would realize the importance of this element. They were realizing that players didn't just want punches and kicks, shots and explosions without any kind of purpose. They needed an incentive. They needed to believe the idea of the world that was being sold to them. They needed immersion. And let's remember that Legacy of Goku 2, although it was not one of the pioneers in giving us this immersive sensation, was one of the most important exponents on the platform. Let's remember that it was already 2003 and many games had achieved this incredible feat narratively and mechanically. But Game Boy Advance, it's sometimes hard to think of exponents with this same ambition. What this game achieved is really important. There are parts of the game where non-canon villains like Cooler pay us a visit, a small attempt to mix the original events with other stories that can be quite interesting. And note that this doesn't mean that they do not respect the canon events. In fact, they are much more specific with the dialogues that occur between characters, that even if there is no particular dubbing, the text dialogues are almost identically calculated from the manga, exposing the relationships between our protagonists, making it really seem like a different representation of what we know will happen. Each character has its own specific line of dialogue that much reflects their mood of the moment, Vegeta being grumpy, Bulma being pretentious and clever, Krillin being insecure, Chaozu being scared, everyone, showing moments like Vegeta's transformation into a Super Saiyan for the first time in Solo. If we talk specifically about changes in mechanics, there were not many, but they represented quite important changes. For example, the indicated characters can transform into Super Saiyan at will, affecting the fighter's damage and speed. Also, the key bar was not recharged automatically as it happened before, but you had to measure well when you could use key attacks at a range. The flight mechanic was removed. Now you only fly when you pass to different areas of the map, not as a mechanic but as a visual representation, nothing more. But well, within all the technical capabilities of a Game Boy Advance, I can say that this is one of the games that best exploits its technical specifications, daring to do different things, encouraging itself to bring more characters from the universe and adapt them to its game ideology, using parts of the Dragon Ball story that really work very well independently. Without doubt, it was a tremendous step forward, and the saga got a good piece of recognition. In the end, they were encouraged to make a third delivery, and we will see that in the next chapter, guys. And well, you know, you can leave me your opinions regarding the game down here. I know that this is one of the audience favorites, and I would like to know your experiences. Thank you very much for watching. That was all for today, and I'll be watching you in the next video. Take care and see ya.